Welcome to Rates and Barrels. It's Friday, March 21st. Derek VanRiper, Eno Sarris here with you on this episode. It is a cram session for people who have not drafted their fantasy baseball teams yet. So if you have not been listening throughout the winter, if you're just picking up the show relatively recently, or if you just feel like you're not quite ready heading into a draft this weekend or early next week, we're going to do our best to get you up to speed in one episode. It is a challenge we are willing to take on, and we've got a ton of ground to cover, so there will not be a lot of housekeeping, but there is some necessary housekeeping, including a reminder. Our 2 live episodes are now 1 week away. Bear Bottle Brewing Company, the Bernal Heights location in San Francisco, March 27th, March 28th, 4:30 start time. Looking forward to seeing as many of you out there as we possibly can. No tickets required, free admission. We'll be hanging out, watching games throughout the day. So we're excited to have those live shows, to get out there, and to have some Kayakers Cove too.
Yeah, Kayakers Cove, which I helped. We helped collaborate with Lester Koga, who's the co-founder and head brewer there at Bear Bottle. We actually did I was there for the brewing, and it's a fun idea. It's a session IPA. It's basically you take a rice lager and then you put some Citra and Nelson and Peacherine in, and the idea is to have some of the aromatics and some of the kind of the taste that you associate with IPAs, but with a super crushable. One of the working titles for this was Day Game. And so that's the idea, is something that you could crush during a warm day. As a runner, I prefer the lower ABVs because I've now done the math and know exactly how many miles I have to run for every beer. And it's not 1 mile per beer.
Not for those double hazies and triple hazies and those big ones you've been drinking for a long time, especially. Yeah, those start to add up pretty quickly. Yeah, as a less active human at this particular phase of my life, I'm finding lower ABV beers are also kind of my sweet spot. So whether it's a Day Game crusher or just something that's a little lighter overall, that is absolutely in my wheelhouse. So I'm looking forward to trying that, and very excited that you were part of that brewing process a few weeks ago once that got started. Let's get into the meat of today's rundown. We begin with some updates, things that you may want to know if you're drafting this weekend. We are still awaiting a follow-up on the second opinion Jared Jones is getting on his elbow. I think we're in that probably don't draft unless it's a pick you're willing to just throw away until we have more information, because it's a sore elbow that required some imaging. So that's just sort of like a wait and see sort of scenario. But the more nuanced decisions come around guys that are either recovering from injuries, ahead of schedule, or slightly behind schedule, that are going to be mostly fine this year. And that conversation begins today with Gunnar Henderson. He's been dealing with that oblique injury now for a couple of weeks. Opening day may not be a lock. This according to Jacob Calvin-Meyer of the Baltimore Sun. We talked about the relative discount we'd be looking for on Gunnar Henderson recently. I think if he falls to the back of round 1, early round 2, you could still take him there, because even if this were...
You took him 9 in the main event. We're happy with that discount.
Yeah, but I think I want that little discount right now, just because we're talking about the kind of injury that can nag or be a recurring sort of problem, and you don't need to opt into an injury problem at that point in the draft. There are plenty of other very good, elite, healthy players sitting on the board next to him. So I think that's the only slight adjustment, is just making sure you're not paying 100% full freight for Gunnar, given that this injury is taking just a little bit longer to heal than they initially expected.
Yeah, I mean, obliques can be tricky. All you're doing is waiting until it doesn't hurt, and then trying to do something and seeing if that hurts. That's how it was explained to me by Zach Greinke at one point. So, we don't know when he's going to be back, but I think the upside is worth it. I think this is a guy who could put together a top 3 season, this season. And so even with a missed week or 2, I think he can still do that. I think he can put together a Bobby Witt-like season that we had last year. So when you have talent like that, you have to be in. I'm still in on Devers. Maybe I want it to be kind of near the end of the third round or, mid third round instead of, at the 2-3 turn where it used to be. I've even gotten a share of Acuna Jr. this year where I waited until the fourth or fifth round, So there's a price for everyone when they have this massive amount of upside I'm in. When they are Jeff McNeil, I'm not trying to... I do have shares of Jeff McNeil in my draft and holds, and it'll probably be fine. But if they are Jeff McNeil, you don't have to draft them because the upside isn't the same, and the downside is he's hurt for a while.
Yeah, I think we
know
do.
That's obvious. I sort of trailed off because I'm that's obvious. But yeah. I mean, still be in on guys that have the huge upside, even if there's a little bit of injury risk.
Right, because the slight discount could prove to be well worth taking, but make sure you're getting that slight discount in these instances. I think Henderson's teammate, Felix Bautista, is a little tougher to get a good read on. He's coming off of Tommy John surgery. He's made a handful of appearances this spring. I think it's a total of 4 innings, 7 strikeouts, just 1 walk so far. And the way Brandon Hyde was talking about the opening day roster just made it less than clear if Bautista is definitely going to be on it. But even if Bautista's not ready for opening day, we've been wondering all along how long it would take for him to throw in back-to-backs and like how they would manage his workload in the early part of the season. This to me just seems like part of the normal progression for a closer coming off of Tommy John, where April might not look nearly as good as August and September, right? The saves might be sort of backloaded from Bautista, but the question remains, like, how much of a discount do you need to trust Felix Bautista as your primary closer this year?
Not much more than where he's going. I'm comfortable with where he's going. I mean, the thing about closers and relievers is they can get ready in a hurry. Like, what do they need to see out of him? They've already seen him 4 times. It's not like a starter that needs to build up to a certain amount, They're not going to use him in back-to-back, so they're not going to see if they can use him in back-to-back. So I think he makes the opening day roster. Like, he's already pitched 4 times. The stuff plus in the spring is fine. The strikeout rate is fine. The projections are amazing. Yes, you might not have as many saves as other guys, but I've gotten a couple shares of Bautista and been pretty happy about it. I think that he's in my circle of trust just based on the stuff upside. And the one of the questions, like with Luis Garcia, we got some injury news that he's got to step up off of his rehab. And one of the things points I've made here often is you'd rather see a guy returning from Tommy John pitch to batters before you draft him. And with Garcia, I ended up taking him as like 10th and 11th pitcher in draft and holds, where my starting pitcher, where I'm like, I know that I have this rule, but it's so cheap that I couldn't resist, And shame on me, he's going to have to step up off his rehab, and who knows if he gets to 100 innings this year. But with Bautista, like, how does that affect the rule? Like, we've seen him pitch to batters. I feel like he's draftable. He's fine where he is.
Yeah, occasionally you do get a pretty steep discount too. I think looking at the RotoWire Online Championship drafts in the last 7 days or so, you might find Bautista falling as low as pick 141. I don't think you can expect that, but it's at least a possibility. If you're getting him even in the pick 100 to 120 pocket, that's a really good value for a closer that could easily be a top 5 closer over the course of the year. But again, it might be a little more backloaded. I would shuffle the order a little bit. I mean, Joan Duran is someone I like more than Bautista right now, but I think I take your overall assessment that wherever that last spot is in your circle of trust among closers, it either belongs to Bautista or he's somewhere ahead of it. Like that's kind of where I'm at with him right now as well. Some good news on Christian Walker in recent weeks. He's been working back from an oblique injury. The Astros are going to have him continue to play in minor league games. We talked about this a little bit, I think, yesterday. Oftentimes what you'll see for guys who've been dealing with these nagging injuries, they won't play in the major league spring games. They'll play in minor league games because it allows the team to backdate a possible IL stint further and shorten up the absence if they have a setback. So he's not completely out of the woods, but I would say Walker is at least tracking towards missing very little time to begin the season, if he even misses time at all.
Yeah, I think he should be restored to just about where he was being drafted before the injury news.
Almost back. Okay. We can live with that. Pick 97 is his average ADP in the...
He does represent a little bit of a cliff where he goes, I think, after him you're less excited about your first baseman.
Would you rather have Josh Naylor today or Christian Walker?
Yeah. I'd rather I'd rather have one of them and not what comes after is basically what I'm saying. Like, who's after them? And you start getting into...
there's one guy I think you like that goes after. Jake Berger goes directly after. He's fine. Vinny Pasquantino. I think you probably like Pasquantino all right.
It's all right.
Then Tristan Cassis.
It starts to get bad after that. No, Cassis, all right. So maybe I'm wrong. Yeah,
well, then there's a 40 pick gap. Then you get down to Goldschmidt.
That's where I don't like.
Banged up Spencer Steer, Michael Tolia.
There is a difference between Walker and Naylor and Pasquantino and Cassis, which is just floor versus ceiling. And you're asking for something you haven't seen yet from Pasquantino and Cassis to some degree. Whereas with Walker and Naylor, you're just asking for what you've already seen.
Right. I think what you're likely to see is there's currently about a 15-pick gap between Naylor and Walker. That might close over the course of the weekend as people realize what happens.
How much Naylor's going to steal. We don't even know how much he's going to hit homers because this new park is not quite as well aligned with his skills in Josh Naylor. So
moving to Chase Field's tough.
So, but one thing about Naylor is he makes more contact than Walker, so possibly better batting average. So I think they'll be pretty comparable players. I'm happy with either of those guys. And to some extent, if you're 10, 12 team leagues, I could rather have one of those guys and then maybe have, if I want to double tap, like a Cassis or Pasquantino for corner infield, just because if it doesn't work out, you have more options. You have more positions to go to. You can backfill that in other ways.
Yeah, it's a good way to think about it too. Possibly get two from that pocket. Some other names in the news right now. Hayden Wesneski sent for some x-rays on his foot. He got hit by a comebacker, but he was doing drills on Friday. So I think this is more of a day-to-day, just making sure nothing's wrong. We'll keep an eye on it just in case. But I still like Wesneski as a pretty late-round possible sleeper as one of the back-end starters in Houston, especially with less pressure coming from Garcia due to that setback, right? It's among the names they could eventually have back in the fold. And I did see Lance McCullers Jr. toss an inning earlier this week. His first game action since the 2022 World Series, which kind of just fits into the Drew Rasmussen, happy to see him back on the mound bucket. Like, don't know where it really goes from here and how much he's going to be able to pitch and how much they can stretch him out. But just the fact that he made it through all of this rehab to finally pitch in a game again says a lot about how hard he worked to get there.
Yeah, I watched that game. He pitched an inning, and then Arrighetti pitched after him. And it's hard. It's really hard to. I think it does fulfill that bucket of like pitching to major leaguers. So hey, that's really interesting. But in terms of like prognosticating how he'll look and how many innings he'll have off that one inning, I couldn't do that for you just because he's been just the most innings risk pitcher in baseball. But my ranks came out today, and Arrighetti pitched after that, and some people already noticed that Spencer Arrighetti dropped a little bit in the rankings. I had him as a breakout pitcher. I still like him, but that look wasn't favorable for me. He was really nibbling to lefties, and command wasn't there. And I hope I wasn't just really influenced by like one start where the command wasn't there, but we know that Arrighetti's command is not that good. So I was just left wondering if he has dominant enough stuff to just aim for the middle of the zone, or if he's kind of going to be a nibbler that has strikeouts but also has walks and has some troubles against lefties. So that's why he dropped a little bit.
Good explanation. Yeah, be sure to check out those updated ranks, theathletic.com/rates and barrels. Get a subscription if you don't have one already. I did see Mason Wynn back in the lineup on Friday. He was dealing with some wrist soreness this week. He's had a bad spring. Is there anybody who's had just a miserable spring that, at least to our knowledge, it hasn't impacted their job, but has changed your opinion, similar to the Arrighetti situation? Where you're like, I don't like what I've seen right now. I'm not panicking about Mason Wynn. For the record, I look at him as a guy that could run a lot more. I think he even said as much at whatever their winter festival is. I don't know if they call it the Cardinals Caravan or the best winter tour in baseball or whatever they call it. But he looks like a player that could take a massive step forward, maybe be a regular leadoff guy for the Cardinals as well. I think that's at least in the cards as something he could earn over the course of the year. And as their starting shortstop, he's going to play every day as well. But whether it's Wynn or someone else, are there any other springs that have really scared you away from a player?
I don't know if it's scared me totally away, but George Springer's spring, I just wish he'd hit a homer or something. And power is one of those things that he could hit 2 homers today, and all of a sudden his line would look great. But he again has the high walk rate and the good strikeout rate, and absolutely no power. And I wonder what his season will look like. But projections, he's always a value in every draft. And so I would love to give him that sort of, hey, old player oatmeal kind of stamp. But if he's down to like 12 homers, I don't think he has, much speed. So now the downside's starting to look like, what if he has like a 230, 12-12 season? Then he's not going to be the value that your auction calculator says he will be. So I think that's why his ADP has always been below where the auction calculator said. And we know from Jeff Zimmerman that if you're looking at a projected bounce back for a player that's over 32 years old, that is not as valuable, not as sure of a thing as a projected bounce back from somebody who's younger. So, that's where Springer resides, right in that sort of old bounce back bucket. And you have to be careful with those. I would maybe take 1 or 2 per draft. My favorite in that bucket right now is Nolan Arenado. He's going to be in my bold predictions that come out early next week. And his bat speed is back. So that's a spring training that's affected me maybe in the opposite way.
Yeah, sometimes it can cut that way. You see a good spring and it either just completely changes your opinion or maybe changes the team's opinion, or it's enough to break a tie in a job battle. We did see that with Curtis Mead. He is going to make the Rays opening day roster. Eloy Jimenez is not, so I'm a little sad about that, but he's going to stay in the organization, it sounds like, go to Durham and possibly make an impact later on this season. Is Mead a late round flyer that is now on your radar as a result of this development?
Yeah, it's hard to know exactly how they will parse out the playing time in Tampa. And if you do have more time than just listening to this, I recommend just looking at the depth charts on every team. They have a whole all the teams in one place at Fangraphs, and you can kind of look where the playing time share is and where you disagree. Right now, they say Mead gets 22% of the at bats at DH, 4% at first, 7% at second. That's
a small side platoon guy.
Yeah. That's not super exciting. Now, what the Rays will do with a right-hander is probably find him some right-handed at-bats, like against right-handers, just to keep him fresh and keep him in the lineup. They do mix and match. There'll be some matchups where they like him. They'll sit Yandy Diaz because he's a veteran. Or because they want more defense. Whatever it is, they do play around with this sort of stuff, but I don't think we've seen a lot of Mead in the outfield. And so he would have to swim past Jonathan Aranda at DH and Christopher Morel at DH/left field to get full-time playing time. So I can't anoint him. I can't give him that just yet. I would want to see a week's worth of what they're doing in Tampa to tell him more.
Yeah, D-Rays Bay has a post about Mead making the roster, and it points out Mead has played at first, second, and third this spring, so at least trying to find a defensive home, even if he doesn't have one just yet. You did mention something in passing there that I think makes Mead worth drafting with maybe your last pick of a 12-team league. It's if he beats out Jonathan Aranda. Jonathan Aranda has done great things at AAA, just hasn't been able to really lock into a prolonged opportunity at the big league level. If Mead out hits Jonathan Aranda, I think he could just be the DH. Like that's a possibility, but you just may have to wait a few weeks, maybe even a month before a shift like that happens. So there is at least one spot that's not as crowded as the others, and it happens to be the DH spot for the Rays. A few pitching injuries to mention kind of as a flyby here. Ranger Suarez dealing with some back tightness, but he was supposed to play catch today on Friday, so that's probably good enough news. We don't have to necessarily scratch him off your list, but just keep an eye on it.
They've been slow walking him. This spring. So maybe that's why. I've been trying to read the news and be like, why is he behind this spring? And it must be the back.
Yeah. Ryan Weathers out 4 to 6 weeks with a forearm strain. That probably knocks him off the list for just about all leagues outside of NL-only leagues or leagues with infinite IL spots. But curious to see what happens when he comes back, because he was putting a nice spring together on top of what he did around the finger injury last year. Max Scherzer
all the way down. What's funny is before you make that Max Scherzer update, because I'm not sure I had that in hand when I was doing my rankings. Weathers was all the way down to 105. I've got him right next to Frankie Montas, and maybe this is wrong. I have him ahead of Max Meyer. Max Meyer's having good spring. If you want to take him over Ryan Weathers as the new sort of, Marlins pitcher du jour, then you do that. Max Meyer has made a lot of changes, and he was in my Deep League Breakout article. But he also has the same strikeout rate he's always had. So it's kind of a little bit weird to be like, this guy's breaking out. He has an 18% strikeout rate. It's going to be totally different this way. So, what is the Merz Scherzer update?
Scherzer's taking the 2-hour bus ride to Fort Myers to face major leaguers on Saturday, which is good. He's been dealing with the thumb problem. And yeah, it's kind of what we said earlier about Walker, where, hey, you're playing against the major leaguers. They can't backdate that IL stint. Max wanted to take the bus ride it just to face the major leaguers is, it checks based on everything I've ever heard about him.
Yeah. He's all about it. And it's like with Verlander and talking about pitching until he's 45. Like, they're going to have to basically pry the ball out of those two guys' hands.
It still seems like they're in this ongoing battle to see who can stay in the big leagues longer, too. Like, unspoken, perhaps, but still, like, hey, I'm not retiring before him. Like, that's the main goal.
I have them right next to each other in the 60s, and I think they're valuable pitchers still, and that makes them viable in every league. If you want to make Scherzer or Verlander one of your last in a 10 or 12 team league, like, they're viable, and they don't have the same kind of hype as other last pitchers, so they'll probably be there for you on one of your last rounds. Like, you don't have to jump them like you might have to jump a Taj Bradley or definitely Clay Holmes at this point, or a Gavin Williams, who could also be one of your last pitchers in a 10 or 12 team. Instead, you could just wait. We'll let everybody else take the hype and take Scherzer or Verlander in one of your last rounds in those shallower leagues.
Yeah, Scherzer's range in the online championship is now pick 204 to 303. So on average, pick 245. So he has moved up a little bit with the spring that he's put together. Verlander 241 to 334, going slightly later. It's a pick 289 average, looking at those drafts from the last week or so. But you're right, less hype on both given their age than some of the other pitching sleepers, air quotes, that are out there. And I think that pretty much concludes the news segment. Oh, I guess Alex Verdugo to Atlanta, but I just see like a spare part, kind of like Dylan Carlson in Baltimore. It's 1 year, $1.5 million. Probably not good news for Jared Kelenic once the roster gets a little more crowded. At least that would be the guy that maybe has the most pressure on him playing time wise. But until Acuna's back, there's a little bit of room for them to mix and match and basically just use Verdugo as the fourth outfielder, I guess, in that group. But not that excited about him.
Between Verdugo, Kelenic, and Brian De La Cruz, someone is losing out when Acuna comes back for sure.
Right. If everybody's healthy. I guess that's the other caveat that's kind of important to throw in there.
Even then, do you think that Verdugo, Kelenic, Profar, and Harris, they all make the roster. And De La Cruz, wait, that's 5 outfielders. The math gets wonky there too because they have a starting DH in Ozuna.
Right.
So
someone eventually gets bumped off that roster.
Do you think that they all, even by opening day, right? Like somebody's not making opening day.
Well, I think Verdugo won't make opening day just because he signed late. I mean, this is really like a week before the opener. Like, I don't think he's gonna start the year on the big league roster. That's my guess anyway.
They have Nick Allen backing up every position.
Yeah, I mean, sure.
Yeah, why not?
Some ideal build-related questions, though. Just thinking about how rosters are put together. Are there a couple of early rounders for second, third? You can go as far down as you want. But guys that are foundational players that you have been sidestepping at ADP this year. We talked about our most rostered players, and there's some guys at the top that you just can't really get because you don't end up in the right draft seat. But there's some guys that you end up passing on a few times because you had maybe a toss-up sort of decision, and you had a strong preference to go one way versus the other. So who are the early rounders you've been avoiding this draft season?
I haven't got a lot of the pitchers in the first 2 rounds.
Yeah, you don't have any Skeens or Scooble, do you?
No, I do not. I do have one team with Wheeler. I think I got timed out. It was a draft that I didn't know was going on or something, and I got him at the end of the second, so it's not terrible, but I might not have made, but end of second, I'm okay with it. It was the auto draft, so he fell, so that's okay for me. I'm not getting a ton of Ketel Marte. I like him as a player. It's fine, but he's also had a lot of soft tissue injuries, and he's had great years, and then he's had like full on lost years, and as he gets older, paying for Ketel Marte with a second round price makes me nervous as heck. I have 0 shares of Freddie Freeman. There's some revelations about his playing time that make me uncomfortable, frankly. Like, he's not going to play in day games after night games. I don't know how many there are, but I would guess that's 15 to 20 games he's not playing in. You could comb through the schedule and really figure that one out. But on top of that, surgically repaired ankles. I don't love getting a guy right after surgery. Acuna's going in the second. I would never pay that price. When I got him in the fourth. So those are some early names that, I haven't paid the freight on, but a lot of times, the first 2 rounds just has a lot to do with your draft position. And so, I might make some small decisions there, which means I don't have certain players, but it doesn't mean I'm out on them. I did pick, Gunner over Mookie Betts, recently, and have made decisions like that, but it doesn't mean I'm out on Mookie completely. If you want me to be out on somebody in the first 2 rounds, it's Ketel Marte and Freddie Freeman and probably Skeens and Skubal. I don't disagree. Like, certain builds, it makes sense.
Yeah, it's not so much that you don't think that they are deserving of their status atop pitcher rankings. It's more just preference in how you build the roster, that you just want to go the other direction instead. I'm finding that if I'm at the end of round 1, I'm actually sidestepping Francisco Lindor, not for any particular reason, but because when I look at Lindor versus Julio Rodriguez, or I look at Lindor versus Jackson Chourio or Yordan Alvarez, compared to the other hitters, I like all the other hitters just a little bit more. And it's weird because I feel like in the years when Lindor is more of like an end of round 2, beginning of round 3 player, I end up with a lot of Lindor because I think he's really safe, but just feels like we're paying a slight tax, extra little price on Lindor right now that I'm not particularly comfortable with. I wonder if part of that's like also some strange stuff that happens in his projection. 2 of the last 3 seasons, he's hit 270 or better. The projections are all for 260 and under in the batting average department. So maybe that's weighted into some of the calculators and the projections and things I'm looking at. But I just keep finding that I give myself a reason to do something else, even though Lindor is just so stable. I mean, he's doing things that you want some of those younger guys to do more consistently. So I totally understand why wouldn't you just take the guy that already does it? A little bit of it's age, a little bit of it's the possible batting average downside. And I mean, look, almost back-to-back 30-30 seasons. He was 1 steal short of doing that for the second straight year. And it feels like picking nits, but that's what I'm doing when the clock's actually ticking and I'm looking at those options, because I think even though we have those concerns about Yordan Alvarez's legs, I look at Alvarez and I still see that sort of Aaron Judge ceiling. And I feel like it's too hard to pass that up, even though Lindor does something for you across the board in all 5 categories.
Yeah, in the listener league that we have, strikeouts by the batter is a category, and I went with, I believe, Julio Rodriguez first. So I thought Lindor was a pretty good pairing. I was at 15. And when you introduce categories like that, it does change your evaluation of the player. Lindor's ability to slug while not striking out and steal bases made a lot of sense in our league, where strikeouts by the batter is a category, and also extra base hits and stolen bases are still a category. So it makes it hard. If you're in leagues where slugging percentage is a category and stolen bases, think about where you're getting your stolen bases. It's really hard to get stolen bases from guys who slug. So you're going to have to go through it and project out slugging and circle all the guys who have 20 or more stolen bases and try to get a few of those, because a lot of the stolen base guys are gonna tank your slugging percentage.
I can't wait to just look silly for sidestepping Francisco Lindor in some leagues, though. That's going to be like one of the low-key best parts of the 2025 season when he goes 30-30 again. And I'm like, oh, great. I tried to get too cute with it, and I dealt with the Alvarez knee problems or whatever the mistake ends up being.
Yeah, I mean, I feel the same way in the third and fourth rounds. If that's still early rounders that we might be sidestepping in, I'm looking through, and I've made the decision to go pitcher or go in a different direction, maybe Machado over Michael Harris, and I've made that decision a couple of times. So I guess I'm sidestepping Michael Harris. You've convinced me a little bit about some of the stuff. He hasn't necessarily gotten better in every successive season. We haven't really seen growth from him. We've also seen a lot of injury risk. But he's the kind of guy that could put together a season where next year he's a first rounder, right? It's like it could be a mistake. If he has a full season, he goes basically 30-30, like he has that kind of talent.
There are people and sites out there that are people I believe and trust that see the breakout coming from Harris, and all I could say was, yeah, I like him too, but why isn't he getting better? It was more of a question than a pure critique. I do have Harris in a couple of leagues. I'm not sidestepping him, but I'm less confident in the future first round ceiling, I guess. I think it's like the paint with other colors. Don't just take one side or the other. Like the middle ground is just kind of like, hey, it might not happen as quickly as we'd like.
Yeah, I mean, I think you sold me on that, honestly. And then in the third round and fourth rounds, in the third round in particular, in 15-team leagues, I'm not in on the closer. That's a main event type thing where they do that. I don't think you need to do that in 10 and 12 leagues. I mean, obviously the math is different. We're talking about we're talking about picks after 40. So if you're in a 10 or 12 team league already, that's not the third round. You're talking more about the fourth round and after. Even then, I don't love the idea of a 10 and 12 league being in a 10 and 12 team league and taking a closer in the fourth round. I know there's a lot of strikeout upside, and he can help you. If you took like a Corbin Burns, it might help to take like a Josh Hader to like also get the strikeout goodness. But I just have some good confidence that Stuff Plus is very good for relievers, that Felix Bautista will be there later, that John Duran will be there later. And we do have a question specific about closers, so I don't want to go too long about that. But the third round closer is another thing I have not been doing any of.
I've been trying not to do it whenever possible. I think the earliest I took a closer so far this draft season was the fourth round of the labor draft. If I remember correctly, that was the DeGrom Mason Miller combo, if memory serves.
Jesus.
Hey, why not?
Why not? I just love it, dude. It's so not me. I mean, I think draft strategies is our best pairing because we just have different ones. It's great.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's the YOLO yo-yo. Like I'm YOLOing, and you're like, hey, whoa, settle down.
Yeah, all right. We are the YOLO yo-yo.
That's how this show, that's how it works. We had a bunch of questions kind of related to these ideal builds. Giant Tom Bombadil wanted to know when you're drafting your first pitcher, like what goes into your decision to drafting an ace? Any tips or strategies? Any particular person you try to target? I mean, Burns for a little while. You had a lot of Corbin Burns at the early part of draft season. Like what's been your most common or your preferred way to go with your first pitcher? Like that third, fourth round range?
Yeah, I've been trying to get one really good starting pitcher that is in my top 15. Actually, I've been trying to get somebody who's in my top 10. And even in a 15-team league, I want to have an above-average ace, or at least an average ace. And so I've gotten some Cease. In the main event, I got Cease. I've gotten some Corbin Burns. Corbin Burns I thought was a good draft and hold pitcher because I thought the innings would be there, even if the strikeouts were a little bit, by rate weren't necessarily there. I do have a Crochet build where I went and then got, I think, Logan Webb to pair with him because I wanted to kind of reduce my risk a little bit by taking a higher end second pitcher. But, and in the main event, I took Cease and Fromber, which I have both in my top 10 because I just couldn't resist getting two top 10 guys. And also I felt they were a little bit of the yo-yo together. Cease has bad years, but has the strikeouts. Fromber is just steady Eddie tick-tocking every year. So usually, I mean, that's basically in a nutshell. It's try to get one of the later end of the top 10. And so it's been different guys in different builds, but it's rare that I get anybody in my top 5. Other than that time I got Crochet, and I just want to get one in like the 4th round. I've been trying to do like 3 hitters. And then basically a starting pitcher and then a closer. That's been my regular build. So it'll be Burns or Cease or somebody, and then a lot of Munoz or Duran in the 5th.
Yeah, that's the ideal build. Doesn't always go that way. Sometimes there's some runs that happen and you end up having to go to the backup plan. I think the plan I've been implementing the most is waiting a little bit longer, being comfortable with the lower innings aces that bring great ratios, even taking a lot of Dodgers pitching, despite the limited number of 2-start weeks you're going to get from them. If you're in a daily league, that is not a concern at all. If you're in a weekly league, it should be part of your calculation. I've been, even in some instances, trying to stack multiple Dodgers on rosters because I feel like there's the surplus win potential. I feel like the elite ratios are there. And if you have kind of a mix of a couple early with a few late options, you're also kind of building in the injury replacements along the way as well, which is, fun until someone actually gets hurt. And then you're looking at it and going, wait, why did I sign up for this? I knew this was going to happen. Now I have to deal with the tightness that comes from holding on to injured players in leagues that don't have IL spots. But I think it's okay to wait a little longer for an ace if the runs don't happen that way. The way I've corrected for it is if, for example, a Snell or Yamamoto or even Glasnow, who I have a lot of, if one of those guys is my first starting pitcher, I'm probably taking a few from that next cluster to make sure I've got enough quality depth behind them, right? I think when you get your second, third, and fourth pitchers changes a lot depending on who your ace is and how aggressively you pursue them there. So that's the adjustment I tend to make.
Your rankings are gonna change how you draft, but one thing I have noticed is I'm trying to get innings out of my first guy. And since I have innings out of my first guy, I'm looking for my second guy to drop, and I haven't really found that Glasnow, Fried, Yamamoto, Roki, or maybe Strider's kind of rising right now with his pitching. I haven't found really a good spot to pair those with my more stable first guy. A lot of those guys kind of go just a little bit higher than I want. So I haven't ended up with a lot of shares of those guys, like Glasnow in particular. But one thing that I like about your strategy is, and one thing I don't like about your strategy is that I don't like, there's a little pocket I don't really love. And it might just be my rankings, but it's the pocket right after the high risk guys. So I have these like kind of oatmeal-y, good projections. I don't know why I don't like them necessarily, but Pablo Lopez, Joe Ryan, Luis Castillo, Freddie Peralta, Aaron Nola, Michael King, Tanner Bybee. That's a whole stretch of pitchers that I have very little of. And they go higher than I want. They're just not excited. I don't think they can be aces anymore. I think they can be good number 2s. Maybe they're fine where they are. But I took a first guy that I thought was pretty fine. And so for my second guy, I'd rather just take that time off and take hitters. And what I end up doing is coming back in and start shopping with Brian Wu and Shane McClanahan and Spencer Schwallenbach and Ryan Pepio and Christopher Sanchez, guys that I think could become aces and are also pretty projectable. You know what I mean? So the way that I've chosen to do it is by being a little bit less risk-taking with my first one. I price myself out of, those Pablo Lopez types, and I take a break and I come back in with more risk. I just feel like I would rather have my first guy have less risk and then take a bunch of risk later. Like, that's why I have 8 million shares of Ryan Pepio. I'm not saying that he's risk less. I'm not saying he's a lock. I would never say that on these airs. Nobody's a lock, But if you've taken someone that you think is has a less risky profile, like maybe even a Cease or definitely a Corbin Burns, then your second pitcher, you can start taking on risk. Which is why I like that. I like to then be like, hey, I can take risk with the rest of my staff because I feel like my ace is good.
Yeah, basically just flipping the order and maybe saying, fun, high ceiling, high variance, and then floor, and then kind of going back to that more even sort of build.
And that works too, because like glass now isn't as expensive maybe as it should be.
Right. That's what I'm trying to take advantage of, the
Freed.
slight misprices within the market. I feel like there are a few of them, and that's what I've been doing throughout the draft season. Problem is you become like heavily saturated with rosters with the same handful of guys on it. If that guy gets hurt, then your whole season is going to hinge on how well you drafted your depth and then how well you manage the waiver wire. Thanks a lot for that question, Tom. You mentioned before the closer question, and I was just looking at the ADP for Yahoo too, because I know we're very NFBC centric. We talked a lot about the main event stuff earlier in the week and how that's even like another level of let's push closers even harder. But even the Yahoo ADPs for relievers are higher than I would expect. I haven't played in leagues on Yahoo very often in recent years, but I think it's a good snapshot of a place people play where there's a different draft room and different formats and different things. There's still 3, 6, 9, 10. There's at least like 15, maybe even 20-ish relievers that go in the first 150 picks. And we were talking earlier about Felix Bautista. He's in that circle for me, right? So the circle of trust. Emmanuel Clase, even if we're worried about workloads, we're just talking about like skills. Who has the job and who's good? Clase, Devin Williams, Josh Hader, Edwin Diaz, Mason Miller, Raisel Iglesias, Ryan Helsley, Felix Bautista, Joan Duran, and Andres Munoz.
Raisel's not in my circle of trust.
Raisel's not in yours. He's in mine. He's the guy. Like, they don't have enough pressure in that bullpen on him. His skills are still holding up better than you expect.
I know. I someday I'll be right when he's like 42.
You will. He's your Whit Merrifield.
Yeah. But I tried to illustrate it in color and leaderboard fashion. So what I did was I took all of the guys by Oopsie that are projected for 10 saves, and then I sorted them by ERA and by projected ERA. And this is Oopsie has Stuff Plus in it, so this is a way of using Stuff Plus to sort my closers, and it popped for me because it's Diaz, Munoz, Duran, Clase, Bautista, Williams, Helsley at the top. I'm like, that is my circle of trust. You can just circle that top and just be like, that is it. That's it. Because when you get down to like Scott, Walker, not all of a sudden you're getting those ERAs are closer to 3. There's some question with Scott about what the playing time share will be. With Jeff Hoffman, there's a question about health. Pete Fairmank's health. Doval's not even the closer there. And so that's why I kind of have Josh Hader as just a guy that every year I'm like, is he in my circle of trust or isn't he? I think he is, but like hasn't he almost lost his job twice or lost his job for like a couple weeks twice?
Hader?
Yes.
I mean, the San Diego instance, I think, was the main one that I remember.
And then
he was also one?
Like, I think he was bad in Houston for like a few weeks.
But with that contract, it's not going to happen. Like he's extremely safe because of his contract.
He strikes me as a little bit like Diaz, where like, he has bad command, and the year that Diaz had where he was just bad is like possible for Hader. And so Hader's in. That's my circle of trust. It was illustrated kind of perfectly by Oopsie with just Hader being like, oh, look at Hader down there. And then I'm okay with one.
You're okay with one from this group and then taking your shots later. Okay, so
I'm okay with one closer that is assured of a job, and then 2 or 3 guys that, like, I've got builds where I've just got John Duran and AJ Puck and 2 guys that aren't closers yet.
Yeah, well, part of that is that there are still some job battles to be decided. That's a factor in all of this too. And I would say the Arizona closer battle, which we may not get an answer to. I saw a report from Alex Weiner of ArizonaSports.com. It's 98.7 FM. It's one of the local radio stations out there. And their manager, Tori Lavulo, saying that they are probably holding off on naming a closer before the season. Went through the usual, like all my guys, and we'll play the matchups. And even if they gravitate towards someone, we're probably not going to know who it is between now and the first game that counts. Because they love to lie. And I don't know. It's not like it's giving anything away. You still have to plan to face those guys if you're going to
start playing, and they'll get on the mound eventually. It can't be like, no, he's not on the mound.
Yeah, you're still going to have a plan for what you're going to do against them, regardless of what inning you see them in. So I don't think it's like this tactical it's a secret. Like, it's just, I don't know if keeping everybody in suspense in the bullpen is somehow like fun for them, or what the reasoning is.
Or just respect for the players, that you're not like debating their roles in public.
Yeah, maybe. You know, that could be a good reason. You don't want to,
like, early in spring be like, Bednar's our closer, and then 2 weeks later be like, well, I don't know. You'd rather be like, I don't know. We're still thinking about it until you're very sure. So I think that's part of it. But I mean, you make a good point. I think in that first of all, like, you know, there's a lot of noise in what we're trying to figure out, who has the roles or not. In the signal is hard there. The second one is so all pitchers have a 40% chance of ending up on the IL at some point this season. That's a hard rock number. But then also 40% of saves come from the waiver wire.
Okay,
in almost any league. You can do something like if you have draft and holds, look at your draft and holds, like what the saves totals are that like lead those, and then look at leagues that have FAB and compare them. And it's about 40% difference. You can do fine in a draft and hold with like 60 saves.
All right.
You know, even 50 and 40, you're doing fine, but in other leagues. So what I'm saying is, if I know there's 40% out there to be had, I'm going to participate in that 40%. I'm going to try and nail one and try to, buy the others.
I do think the shallower the league, the more comfortable I am. There's fewer teams to compete with. Like, that shifts me a little bit. I was really into both Tanner Scott and Jeff Hoffman earlier in draft season. Their prices, like everybody's prices, have gone up. And I think I would still like to get two, where I get one from the first group we talked about. And then if we're not putting the likes of Scott and Hoffman or Trevor McGill into that circle of trust, if they're still sitting out there at like pick 120 to 150, I might be okay getting a second one there.
I've done some Fairbanks. I know the injury risk is bad, but when he's in, he's probably the closer, So there are some second level closers I got. In the main event, we did Hoffman and Puck. And to go back to your Arizona question, if I had to pick one, I think you've convinced me, Puck. Justin Martinez is a little bit wild. He's got a little bit of the hair in the nose sort of situation. So I know that Puck doesn't have the most amazing command either, but he's been dominant as a reliever.
Yeah, so he's on a different level as a reliever.
Yeah, I'm picking Puck.
That's where I'm at on that one too. And it's a reminder. I think for years in this show sort of laughed at the idea that pitchers couldn't be used for roles between 1 and 5. Like, you're either a short reliever or you're a starter. Well, you could also be useful in saves even if you're not getting 30 of them, right? There are numbers between 0 and 30. So if it's a 35 save team and it's 26 to 9 or something, that's still useful for both of those guys if there's enough strikeouts and good ratios to go along with it.
Yeah, and this is illustrated every year when you run the auction calculator at the end of the year to look at earned value, and there's always a Tyler Holden. There's always somebody who has like 5 saves and 5 wins and a 1 ERA, and it's not easy to spot those guys ahead of time. So I'm not saying you should draft those, but when you have somebody who's Puck, who's probably going to have a great ERA and a lot of strikeouts and at least 5 saves and at least 5 wins, you can say that guy's likely to be a top 30 reliever, top 20 reliever, even if he doesn't get the job, just like what you said, So it's like, the deeper the league is, the more I can be like, is AJ Puck a good pitcher that I want in my lineup this week in my best 9? Yeah. And would he maybe get me a save or a win or whatever it is? Yeah. So there's times when AJ Puck, like imagine AJ Puck, who's not the closer, versus Jordan Hicks for a week. Jordan Hicks might start once, go 5, strike out 3, not get the win. AJ Puck might pitch 3 times, get 6 strikeouts.
Might get you a win, might get you a save. I mean, might get you nothing. Like that's also possible too. But it's a good point in those deeper mixed leagues, especially. I think in more shallow leagues, maybe those guys have a little less value. But I've come around to hey, take the chance and use them when you have to, because they'll actually be okay as your 9th pitcher in. The other question, as it goes to position depth, is, which position is the deepest? Which one have you been waiting on the most because you say, it's fine, I've waited 10 rounds and I'm okay with these guys as my starters? Like, have you had a position or possibly 2 that you have started to consistently wait on, and maybe it's because of another position that runs pretty thin. Like, are you playing a scarcity game at any particular spots?
I do not like late third baseman.
I love late third baseman. Why don't you like them?
I mean, I guess late is a definition, you know.
No, late. I like Josh Young at pick 200. You mentioned Arenado before. He goes.
I guess some of that's born of in draft and hold season. Like third basemen are just awful and terrible and really hard, you know. But in more of a sort of 10, 12, 15 team starting environment, yeah, I'm okay with Arenado late. Joey Ortiz has been a late starter for me. You know, so there is something going on there that's fine. But I do think there's some landmines. I don't know what Michael Garcia's projections are always going to be good, but he's playing center field, and I don't know what that means, that he's going to take over center field or if he's going to become a utility guy or what's happening. He does not, you know, Jeff Zimmerman has an OPS rule. Even if you don't have OPS in your league, circle guys with a below 700 OPS projection because they can lose their jobs. I think most teams are looking for at least a 700 OPS from most of their positions. And, you know, guys like Michael Garcia can get uncomfortably close to that number. Now, of course, if you're Connor Norby in Miami, you're probably just getting the full year to figure it out. So maybe it doesn't matter exactly what your projected OPS is, but you know, I think it does matter. And then like super late, I just like Vierling, Candelario, Isaiah Kiner-Falefa, like a lot of those guys I don't like. So I do get nervous about third base in pockets. I guess you can wait on that. Shortstop is good for a long time. Now, if you want to get two, then that's fine. You do have to I think you want to do it in your top 20, and it does get bad after 20. So, but the thing that's nice about shortstops is they're young, they're athletic, they're the best players on the field most of the time. So, you know, if you want to do your MI out of a shortstop, Dansby Swanson is falling. I don't know why Dansby Swanson and Xander Bogaerts and Jeremy Pena are always available, but if you want to get a stud shortstop at the top and then supplement it with another shortstop in the Swanson, Bogaerts, Pena range, I think you've done a good service to your team.
Yeah, shortstop depth is good up until about that point. I can look at the Carlos Correa line and say, okay, that's about the last per game shortstop that I trust to be every day when healthy. After that, it's guys that are going to move around a bit more, or guys that have even worse injury histories than Correa, like Trevor Story goes a little bit later. A lot of utility guys start to creep into the conversation, or maybe guys that won't even hit enough to be everyday players. Like it's generally a deep enough group. I've found that Xavier Edwards is on none of my teams. I'm never close to drafting him. There's a group of middle infielders like Luis Rengifo, Xavier Edwards, Bryce Terang. I never draft those guys.
I got one share of Terang, and I immediately took another second baseman because I was so nervous.
Yeah, you're just trying to protect yourself. Like, it's not even like it's not that I expect him to lose his job. He's a phenomenal defender. But
like 50 stolen bases. Yeah.
It's a little bit like the Michael Garcia, where it's like, oof, that bat leaves a lot to be desired. And
well, let me put you on the spot then. What position are you most afraid of the bottom? I think I'm looking at it right now.
First base, maybe? The bottom at first base.
After that Pasquantino Casas area, it does get a little bit iffy.
Yeah, there's a few players I like sprinkled in. Any position you can find something, but I think I get more nervous about the idea of almost any one of, you know, Yandy doesn't hit for enough power. I know he's a good player, and Luis Urias, I don't want to use those guys as starting first baseman. Steer's
Hoskins
hurt.
Might hit 210.
Tolia
doesn't actually have good batted ball stats.
And with Bush, they added Justin Turner, so you're kind of worried that a platoon's going to be there. I like Tyler Soderstrom, but Mountcastle's got position time pressure.
Like if he's starting for you at CI or something, I feel like you've messed up a little bit.
Yeah, I look at a lot of the players at that position, and I see the various warts, and I see that as a position defensively where their organizations are usually willing to share playing time, and I just see a lot of down arrows with that group especially. So I do see a bit of a cliff. It's probably after Paul Goldschmidt for me. I think there's still enough oatmeal-y goodness in that ballpark. His down year, his decline last year, it's real, but it's not so extreme that it's unusable as like a fringe 150 overall pick. Like it's still
I'd
probably
feel
okay.
better coming out of it with Berger. Like the worst case is like Naylor, Berger, Walker, Cassis. Like get somebody out of that, you know. Goldschmidt himself is like, you know, we just talked about the projections for bounce back projections. He's 37. So, like, maybe it's okay if he just does what he does last year and hits 250, 22 homers, and 11 stolen bases. Like, that actually would be okay, you know? And, of course, he has more upside than that with a nicer park for his skill set and a probably good lineup. But I think even Goldschmidt, I've got Goldschmidt as my first baseman in a couple places. He's our main event first baseman. And I think he's out with a back right now. He's 37. You know, like how often is he going to do that? So I prefer Naylor, Berger, Walker, Pasquantino, Cassis as like, I'm going to get somebody from there. And if I get somebody from there, that means that my CI is probably a third baseman. Because I don't want to shop unless I get two out of that group. I don't want to shop in the later groups. Second base also makes me a little nervous. I like Morel and Geloff a little bit because they hit the ball hard, they steal bases, but they can wreck your batting average, and there is a non-zero chance that they get sent down or don't play every day. Like they're flawed players, you know. Even their projections on Fangraphs have them for 500 plate appearances, so that tells you something about like, you know. So they're exciting but flawed, and then you got Cronenworth, who's so boring, and he's ended up on a lot of my teams because he's so boring and he's first base, second base, and that's fine for me. But then there's Maikel Garcia, Brandon Lau. If you're in a weekly league, he's not going to play against lefties. Most likely, he hasn't so far. And then there's Brendan Donovan, who's like a kind of profiles as a really good utility player on a team that's going young. And then Bryce Turang, Nico Horner's hurt. Willie Castro is a utility guy. Rengifo should be a starter because it's the Angels, but he's also been a utility guy. And I think they're talking like he might be a utility guy again, you know? And then you get to, you know, Colt Keith and Tara Estrada and Gavin Lux. They're a little bit exciting, you know, as sleepers, but like I would feel bad if they were my starting MI or something. So second base, that's why I have so many shares of Andres Jimenez and Bryson Stott. And we had somebody in the Discord, you know, talking about India. India is the guy that I have circled as the last chance. So I circle Jimenez, Stott, and India. And I'm like, I need one of these. And I end up taking Jimenez and Stott before I have to take India. But some people like India, and I think the Royals will run pretty wild. I don't really think that's a great lineup, though. So I don't think he's going to get a lot of runs in RBI, honestly. I don't think it's a good lineup. And I don't think he'll hit many homers. So it's not my favorite play there. I'd rather have Jimenez or Stott. I have those guys circled as being almost the same guy, like if you think about it. And that's why I end up with a lot of Jimenez and Stott, because I'm afraid of second base. Honestly, I'm afraid of late second base.
I'm less afraid of it than you are. I think I like Colt Keith as a breakthrough guy this year. Build on what he did a season ago. Glaber's going to play a ton. He's cheap. It's very oatmeal at this point. You hate Glaber?
Detroit hitter has to be great, I think, and I'm not sure Glaber Torres is great.
No, he's definitely not great, but I think it's a low K rate sort of profile. It's an everyday job. It's a lineup that could be a little bit of a riser as a collective group. So I think the counting stats will be. I think last year is actually a pretty good indicator of what Torres is more likely to do. If you gave him another year at Yankee Stadium and he hit 15 homers again with that much playing time, I would have been shocked. So I think we saw the floor last year.
The projections all say that he's going to do better than what he did last year, and I think he's just probably going to do what he did last year.
I think the ballpark now, Comerica just like it softens the rebound. The rebound might have been 22 homers if he was in Yankee Stadium. It's going to be like 18 because it's Comerica. But I think the average will be fine. It won't hurt you. The runs will be surprisingly good. The RBIs won't be that terrible. And he may even run a little bit again, right? Because he took the pillow deal. So I think we could just see a slightly different version of Glaber, even though the park and lineup have been downgraded for him. Good oatmeal. Good oatmeal.
Outfield is obviously by its nature the deepest position because it's it's
there's
three
a lot
positions.
of them, three of them. Yes.
Yeah, and there's four. But it becomes skinnier because you have to fill five. In most settings. So I don't think there's a one size all outfield strategy. I've tried multiple different strategies. I've had teams where I invested pretty heavily and took like 2 outfielders in the first 5 rounds. I think I even started outfield first, second round in one build. And I didn't like that because I think, there's always outfielders at the end. But there are guys in the outfield that are just amazing hitters. And they're just really, really good. And you'll find guys like Taylor Ward and Brian Reynolds will fall in every draft because they're boring. But they're good boring. They're definitely good oatmeal. And so, I think outfield is the kind of thing where I go into my queue. I think queue management is one of the biggest things in fantasy. I go into my outfield. You're creating tiers, basically, as the draft is going. And what I'll do is I'll do this where I go across all positions and be like, how many $10 players are left by the auction calculator? And I'll get all the $10 players that are left on the auction calculator, put it in my queue. And then I'll sort through it and I'll be like, actually there's like 5 outfielders. So maybe I'll just try to wait and get that last $10 outfielder. But sometimes you find that there's only one $10 outfielder left. And that's when you take Brian Reynolds, or that's when you take Taylor Ward, or whatever it is. So, I think that outfield is something where you gotta be flexible. If you sometimes it makes sense to go in because nobody else is doing it, and everyone's like, there's gonna be outfielders late, and you're just like, I have the studliest outfield of all time. Let me see what my best outfield is. While you like, what's been your outfield strategy?
Like you, I've tried a couple different things where I've said, I don't care if I have 2 or 3 early outfielders. If they're the best available players, I think I like my teams better when I don't do that. So it just depends on the room and draft position, I guess, as far as whether I'm actually going to follow through. The reason why I like leaving outfield spots open, like 4 and 5 especially, you want to have those available after pick 200 in a lot of leagues, because whatever category you need, it's generally still available in the outfield because there's so many different types of players out there. You need some speed. Cool. Jake McCarthy's out there. You need power. Okay, Jorge Soler's there around pick 200. You need speed later. Maybe you're looking at like a TJ Friedl for 15 or 20 bags and some power. Oh, you want big time power? Matt Wallner's sitting there instead of TJ Friedl. Oh, you want a guy that almost went 30-30 on a per game basis 2 years ago? Nolan Jones is out there as a sleeper. Like there's just a little bit of everything, categorically speaking.
Shortstop where they're generally a little bit less power, a little bit more speed. You know what I mean? Like it's not.
Yeah, and that's part of my fear at first base too. Is like the categorical juice is, what you're gonna get. Like it's kind of obvious. It's like a 240-20,
and you're like, I just have Yandy, and you're like 15 homers behind everybody else because they all got 30 homer first basemen.
Right. So there's just a couple little quirks of first base that the outfield just doesn't exist, because you're talking about center fielders and corner mashers and just guys that just have very different skill sets as offensive players that all play the same positions defensively, at least how they're categorized as just general outfielders.
I think my best outfield might be my main event outfield. It's Jackson Merrill, Brian Reynolds, Ian Happ, Lars Nootbaar, and Jake Fraley.
Yeah, that was pretty much like every chunk, and then like Fraley is like maybe a streamer, see what happens sort of guy. But if that's the worst player in your starting lineup, then you're probably going to be okay.
Yeah, by the time you're taking your... And most of my fifth outfielders are pretty iffy. I guess I have a draft champions where it's Jackson Merrill, Brandon Nimmo, Cedric Mullins, Nolan Jones, and Kyle Tucker. That might be my best one.
Oh, that's your best one. Kyle Tucker, yeah, not
sorry,
the order they were drafted.
He was up there. I was like, "Where's my fifth one?"
I'm still wondering if Fraley's.
That's the one I started. Tucker Merrill. I started Tucker Merrill.
Yeah,
and that's fine. I just have a great outfield. Nolan Jones is my fifth. I feel good about that.
Couple quick questions before we go, because we are going to get you to your chat on time. I promise. We had a mailbag question. Who are some of your favorite pitchers who might miss the roster cut at the end of spring or possibly lose a job battle? Looking for some guys with close proximity for dynasty targets, minor spots, bench spots. The question came from Eagles19 in our Discord.
I thought this was a question about 6 starters that weren't making it in particular. So I just took the 6 starters that I liked the best. I didn't try to do some fancy query. I just was like, look through all the depth charts and was like, these guys I don't think are making the big leagues. And I like most of them, depending on price, of course. Andrew Painter is the guy that everyone knows. I don't have to tell you about that. I think that David Festa and Zebby Matthews are not making it because Chris Paddock just pitched, I think he got 7 strikeouts in 4 innings and was sitting 97 and
touched 111 according to StatCast. That might have been a loose wire. Like, wow, he really hasn't taken the criticism very nicely. So I fired him up. Good.
But with options and where he stands contractually, I feel like they're just going to send Zebby and Festa down. I think maybe Zebby has passed Festa, so I like Zebby a little bit better. Maybe it's got that Spring Stuff Plus number I have over there. I think Logan Henderson with Milwaukee might need to use him because DL Hall is hurt. They have some injury issues. Mizorowski could be on this list as well, but I think maybe Logan Henderson's ahead. I don't know that one for sure. Quinn Matthews is one of my favorite 6 starters that won't make it. I've turned around on him. I thought he was boring, but one thing that is nice about him is he does have a wide arsenal and he has decent command, and the Spring Stuff numbers are good. I think he's pretty polished, and he's going to land in a pitcher's park. So that's something I like about Quinn Matthews. Hayden Birdsong might make the rotation.
What? He is? Huh? I thought it was Roop.
I think it's Roop. I don't know what it is.
Oh.
They're still talking about Hicks making the rotation. I would say, hey, your bullpen could be really amazing if you had Hicks, Doval, Ryan Walker, Randy Rodriguez. That could be and Tyler Rogers. That could be I've teased that already.
Yeah.
But that's what I would do. I think I'd put Birdsong and Roop in because you'd still have Carson Whisenhunt. You'd still have some depth there. And you'd have Kyle Harrison just hanging out in the minors. So I think they could both make it. But I think most likely is Hicks and Roop. Just the way they had Roop come in and just do the starter progression all the way through. Roop could start tomorrow. You know what I mean? And so, anyway, whoever doesn't make it between Birdsong and Roop is on this list. Joey Cantillo is a change-up first guy with bad command. I don't know that I love him, but I like him a lot, and I think that Cleveland's going to have to go to him at some point. I don't think they'll do it right away. Smith Shawver's on that list. There's some good ones. Oh, by the way, Jake Bloss, great Spring Stuff numbers. And he's probably the 6th starter in Toronto, right?
Yeah, I like that Buffalo roster a lot. Got some interesting players that they've got stockpiled as depth. And the job battle that I feel like I overlooked throughout this draft season is actually third base for the Blue Jays because it's Ernie Clement versus Addison Barger. They do very different things. We had some people here in the fall telling us hey, Ernie Clement's got a little more going on with the bat than you're giving him credit for. There is double-digit power, double-digit speed.
Yeah.
He got a Gold Glove nomination too at third base.
So much contact. Yeah, I think he's got the job. So Barger is somebody that might go on this list as like a 6 starter type, go back down and he gets the next shot at something.
Or he might go play in the outfield because if Loperfido's playing center while Varsho's out, Barger could play left, and then basically Barger versus Loperfido becomes a battle for playing time since Barger does occasionally play in the outfield.
Barger is yoked, dude. I don't know if you've seen
man.
He's just. I don't think I've seen a more yoked guy this spring.
But yeah, Barger is a tank out there for sure. Last question as we go: is there any injured player, any prospect that you think is worth waiting for in redraft, like a discounted player or a rookie that might not play right away that you are trying to stash away on your rosters? In the vein of, should you draft a Christian Campbell? Or is there anybody out there that you think is underpriced despite their current path to playing time?
Actually, I think Christian Campbell, I do have a share of him, and I do think that Christian Campbell is cheap enough now where I was going to do that. I have actually been very boring. I've been preferring guys, especially in the new environment with the new rules with regards to playing time, service time, and getting that. They all want to keep that rookie bonus, but they want to give them a taste so that they might win Rookie of the Year the next year. You get a draft pick if the team wins, if the player wins Rookie of the Year for you. So what I've seen from usage is high top prospects do get some September time, keep their rookie eligibility, and then start playing the next year full time. And so those have been players that I would, and I know that James Wood doesn't qualify for rookie anymore, but it's that kind of Dylan Cruz, right? That kind of player I've been more likely to buy on because we've seen something in the major leagues. We have some numbers on them. Guys who've never played the major leagues before that, that we think will debut this year and put a lot of plate appearances together. I think I might have 0. I don't know who's even on that list. Kristen Campbell, I have that 1 share. But
yeah, Campbell, Roman Anthony, Cam Smith. They're all clustered together too.
Cam Smith might be Julio Rodriguezing it right now, where he's just playing so well that it doesn't matter what he's done in the minors. He plays at a position of need, and I think Cam Smith he's worth it. But he's also Cam Smith and Kirsten Campbell cost actual money. You know what I mean? So what I've done a lot of is like I have Noelvi Marte and Jacob Melton. I mean, I'm not telling you to do
cutting it thin. Yeah, don't follow that advice.
Yeah. Well, this is like also like a draft and hold type stuff,
Yeah, very different scenario. But if you're drafting this weekend, just looking for that last, who's the high ceiling dart throw? It's probably Smith.
It's Smith, and then Campbell, because there's still time on him getting it. If there's a ranking, it's Smith, Campbell. I think Anthony's like they have a lot going on in that outfield because I still have Ceddanne Rafaela, who might not have a starting job.
Mm-hmm.
So I think Roman Anthony has a little bit more of a road to hoe.
I think on the pitching side, it's Bubba Chandler for me. I think the injuries they've got with the Jared Jones situation, like the door could open sooner for Chandler. So I think if you're going to stash one prospect or two, just throw him on there.
I'm worried that Thomas Harrington's ahead of him.
Right. But also that depth chart, even when Jared Jones was healthy, was still questionable enough at the back end where it's either like a Heaney injury or Bailey Falter was on there as the number 5. Like there's a world in which Harrington and Chandler are both in that rotation where it's like Skeens, Keller, Heaney, Harrington, Chandler because of Jones being out.
Falter, that's true.
So they could both make it at within like a month or two.
We talked about Painter as a stash, but he's not going to pitch major league innings until mid-season.
Oh, he'd be such a good stash, though. Like, well, in like an IL situation, if he gets placed on the IL, but he might just be in the minors.
In the minors, yeah. If you have an NA spot, though, Jackson Jobe might make the opening day rotation. He's probably, it's him or Chandler, and I think Jobe is slightly closer to taking it. Like right now, it's probably. I'm saying it's Casey Mize in the rotation. Cater Montero to the minor leagues, and Jobe versus Maeda for the 5th spot, which sounds like give it to the kid, but you never know. They might. Jackson Jobe still only has like a 18% strikeout rate this spring. Maybe they say, can you nudge that up to league average before we call you up? And Maeda, like they start Maeda as a starter, and then they move Maeda to the bullpen, which has happened so many times in Maeda's career. So it could just be about the shape of the season, where Jobe goes down for a little bit and has 4 inning starts where they're working on getting more strikeouts or whatever it is. I think is that probable? I think that's 51%.
Yeah, that's 51%. That's why people are in the Discord are like, no, it's Jobe. It's like, yeah, but you're right. It probably could be. Like we just trying to
51-49. I think it's a 50-50 split there, especially because Montero puts a little bit of noise in, so it might be like 46% Joe, 45% Maeda, and like 4%, Montero or whatever it is. But there's a lot going on there, and Mize, whatever. Mize, I guess Mize could not make it too, but Mize had such a good spring. He's a former 1-1 pick. He's been working so hard at this. I think Mize is in.
All right. Well, the debate will rage on. And if you have takes on these situations, these job battles that are still going to go down to the wire, and even if Jobe starts the year in the minors, it won't be long before he gets that opportunity. And they could also just look at the situation and say, he's really important to our future. Let's have him working with the big league coaches. Let's make this happen right now. I can see a case for that
Quinn
too.
Matthews, Jacob Mizorowski, Brandon Sproat with the Mets, Jacob Mizorowski in Milwaukee, but also Logan Henderson. Quinn Matthews, if you're looking for pitchers. I don't think Bryce Eldridge is going to have a ton of plate appearances in the majors this year, but what's in his way is Wilmer Flores, and even though I like Gerard Encarnacion, like that is not something he can't get past. So Eldridge could be a stash. It is a tough home park, but he's been amazing in the minors.
Yeah, use those NA spots though if you have them, because they can be really valuable. They can pay off in a big way. Maybe it's in June, but hey, you found the right guy early enough. So a lot of names to consider there. Join the Discord. You can do that with the link in the show description. You can find Eno on Bluesky, Sarris.bsky.social. I'm DVR.bsky.social. Good luck if you have drafts this weekend. That's going to do it for this episode of Raids and Barrels. We're back with you on Monday.
Thanks for listening.